Hey everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video, I'm going to be playing and testing some Ancient Gears. So, this was for subscriber Tyler Duncan, so Tyler, I hope that you enjoy this, and hopefully this deck is very useful to you. Now, the reason why today I'm starting off with some gameplay is because when I was going through this deck, and I was reading through the cards, I actually found it very, very difficult to work out what the goal of this deck is and how you actually should play it. And that is because Ancient Gear cards, they're fairly old and they don't really necessarily work together quite cohesively. In fact, I'm not even going to be using nearly, I don't think I'm using even 25% of the cards that are there for Ancient Gears. We're just using multiple copies of the good ones. And so I had to do a lot of testing in advance, testing with different variants, testing with different builds, and then I finally worked out what the goal of this deck is. And so I want to show it to you before we actually go through the deck build, and I'll talk about the cards. So the focus of this deck is very, very simple. We want to get 2 Earth Machine monsters onto the field, and that is my primary goal all the time. So what we just did was we activated Terraforming to go get our field spell, Gear Town. Now, we're going to activate our normal spell, Ancient Gear Catapult, to destroy our Gear Town, and then summon an Ancient Gear monster from our deck. The best monster to go out for this is Ancient Gear Wyvern, because when Ancient Gear Wyvern is summoned to the field, it's going to be able to activate its effect to get us more cards from our deck to our hand. So that is going to trigger first, and then Gear Town is going to activate afterwards. So Gear Town is going to resolve first, and we're going to be able to enter special summon an Ancient Gear monster from our deck. At this point, it doesn't really matter what we summon, so we may as well go for one of our bigger monsters, and we're going to now summon out Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon. Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon is really, really cool. It basically has the same stats as Ancient Gear Golem, but doesn't have the restriction of it cannot be special summoned, which Ancient Gear Golem does have. With Wyvern, we have to go and add a card from our deck, and what's really cool about Wyvern is you could either add a spell, trap, or you can even add a monster. You can add any card you need, and we went to grab Ancient Gear Fusion. So we've got our 2 Earth Machines in the field, but now we can activate some more effects, and we're going to activate the effect of Heavy Freight Train Derek Crane, who says if you have a normal or special summon a monster, an Earth Machine monster, you can special summon this card from your hand to the field. And so that's just going to give us another monster to use. Speaking of which, we play Instant Fusion to go and get summon Cybersaurus, who is also an Earth Machine monster. So we now have 4 Earth Machine monsters on our field in order to mess around with and start making our plays. So we are going to use 2 of our Earth Machine monsters to now go and summon Ancient Gear Ballista. And Ancient Gear Ballista has a variety of really, really cool effects, and it's going to activate when it is link summoned. So what it can first do is it can add any Ancient Gear monster or a copy of Gear Town from our deck to our hand. Now we've got plenty of monsters, so we're going to go for Gear Town. We're now going to activate our Gear Town, and for us to get another monster to the field, we want to destroy it, which is where Gear Ballista's second effect comes in. Gear Ballista is going to let us choose one of our opponent's monsters, destroy our Gear Town, and it will turn that monster's attack to 0. And this is really nice because it's going to help us do our OTK a little bit later on. Gear Town's been destroyed, so we get, and it's not a hard once per turn, so we get another Ancient Gear Wyvern to the field. And then Ancient Gear Wyvern is a hard once per turn, so we won't get to activate its effect again, but we got another free summon. And so now we're going to do a fusion summon, and we are going to go off and fusion summon Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, mainly by using the cards in our hand, but then also using one of the Wyverns on the field and send it to the graveyard. So here goes all 3 monsters. And here comes one of our big boss monsters, Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, who has 4,400 attack, can do piercing damage, and if this card attacks, your opponent can activate spells and trap cards in response to this card's effect. But we're not done there just yet. We're now going to link 2 more of our monsters away, keeping the biggest one on the board, and we're going to summon Predaplant, Verte, and Anaconda. Predaplant, Verte, and Anaconda is going to hit the field, and if you don't know what this card does, this card has 2 effects. One, I can target a face-up card on the field and make it dark. That's whatever, we don't care about that in this deck. And 2, we can pay 2,000 life points, choose 1 fusion spell from our deck, which will be Overload Fusion, and it will copy its effect. Now, Overload Fusion says I can use cards from my graveyard in order to summon out a Dark Machine Fusion monster. So we're going to banish 4 Ancient Gear Golem monsters from our graveyard, not from our field, do it just from the graveyard, keep your card advantage up, and we're going to get rid of these in order to summon our best boss monster, and that is going to be, drum roll please, Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. Oh, I forgot to say, apologize, there's no music in this. I forgot to turn the music up. I think I was listening to some Spotify. So Chaos Ancient Gear Giant is come to the field, and this is our main boss monster. And so now we're going to go for game. So we're going to attack with Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. Can attack all monsters your opponent controls. It is unaffected by card effects. So he's going to try and activate Sakuretsu Armor, which destroys the monster that is attacking. Sorry mate, my monster has immunity, and then we're going to attack and deal damage, 4,500 damage, and he can attack every monster my opponent controls once each. So yeah, we went into overkill a little bit there. So we did 7,500 damage, and now we attack with Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. And yeah, so I wanted just to show this to you, and now we're going to go over into the deck build, and I'll talk about how this deck is working. Right, so let's break down this deck and I'll show you what Ancient Gears do by their roles. And so let's start off with the starters. Now when you're playing Ancient Gears, or playing my version of this build, the primary goal is just to get 2 Earth Machine monsters on the board. You can then do anything else you want as long as you can kind of fulfill that goal, and everything then flows naturally from that point. So keeping that in mind, here are our main starters. We play 3 Ancient Gear Wyvern. This card says when this is normal or special summon, you can add an Ancient Gear card from your deck to your hand. Searcher, starter, really great card. So moving on from there, we have Infinitrack Anchor Drill at 3 copies. This card is a nice extender and really works well with Wyvern, where you can summon this card first and then special summon any Earth Machine monster from your hand to the field. Ideally you can go with something like Wyvern and then get more searching from that, and then you have your 2 cards on the field. This card also serves as a bomb for the deck, and we'll talk about why later on. Brutal Dozer can also get you 2 Earth Machine monsters on the field by its effect, because you can special summon it to the field by tributing 1 Earth Machine monster, and then it will summon Anchor Drill from your deck. However, when you do so, you are locked into Earth Machine monsters for the rest of the turn, and that will affect your ability to do certain lines of play later on, so be aware of that restriction. For spells, we have Ancient Gear Catapult. Ancient Gear Catapult has the ability, while you control no monsters, to destroy a face-up card you control. The main target for this is going to be Gear Town, because then that will float and get you more monsters to the field. But yeah, that's what Catapult does. Now Catapult also works really well with Foolish Burial Goods, because it has a graveyard effect, and so you can send it to the grave with Foolish Burial Goods. However, you can only use one of this card's effects per turn. So the graveyard effect for this is you banish this card, target a card on the field and destroy it, and then you get a token in replacement for what you destroyed. So you have to decide when you're in advance what you're going to go for with Gear Catapult. If you want to get it to the graveyard first, you can play Foolish Burial Goods and send it there, and then you can activate its graveyard based effect. Instant Fusion is here only to summon out Cybersaurus. It's an Earth Machine, an extender. You can also use it to summon out Thousand Eyes Restrict. Yeah, we'll get Thousand Eyes later on. And then we've also got One Pot of Desires. I actually might think it might be best to drop this card, because you have cards which are one-off that are part of your win condition. So test it, see if you like it. If you end up banishing your fusion spells with this card, then you fucked up, so you might want to take it out. But if you don't, then you get 2 cards. So I don't know how I feel about Desires. Terraforming searches field spells, and then Urgent Schedule is a really cool card. You get to special summon, it's a quick play spell, so you can use it in either player's turn, but then you get to special summon 1 level 4 or lower, and 1 level 5 or higher Earth Machine monster to your field. Their effects will be negated, they will be in defense position, but it gets you 2 monsters to the field. I strongly recommend putting Ancient Gears on the field, because they have, you can use them in the graveyard with Overload Fusion later on to summon your win condition. Extenders. Extenders are in these extenders in your deck, and you've got some really awesome extenders. Your level 1 monster here, Turbo Booster, is an Earth Machine monster that says if you have normal summon a monster this turn, you can summon this card from your hand. That's it. It's not hard once per turn. It's not a soft once per turn. You can do it as many times as you want to. If you have multiple copies, you get multiple monsters. Really great extender for this deck. Ancient Gearbox is not that great. It's mainly just a primary extender. You combine it with Ancient Gear Wyvern. Where is Wyvern? And what you do with this card is when you add it to your hand, you can then add a monster with 500 defense from your deck to your hand, and then that main target is going to be your Infinitrack Anchor Drill. So it lets you go plus, but otherwise it's really not a good card. Derek Crane and Bullet Train are very similar. Derek Crane says if an Earth Machine monster is normal or special summoned to your field, you can summon this card from your hand, but then it will have half the attack and defense. So it'll be at 1400 to 1000 defense. But it's mainly there to be a body, so who cares about its attack and defense. And then you've got Bullet Train, which says if all monsters you control are Earth Machines, you can special summon this card from your hand. This will not half its attack and defense. It's a 3000 attack monster and it helps you get game quicker. Ancient Gear Fortress can be an extender, but you don't want to use it as an extender, but I will read to you its extender's effect, and that is if this card is destroyed in the spell and trap zone, you can special summon one Ancient Gear monster from your hand or graveyard. However, you are locked into Ancient Gears for the rest of the turn. Yeah, don't use it as an extender. It's mainly as a defensive card, but I put it here also to bring up a point which we'll talk about now with Gear Town. So Gear Town is your primary card that you want to destroy with your other cards in order to summon out more Ancient Gear monsters from your hand, deck or graveyard. Now what you need to know about Gear Town is that because it is an old school card, it has old school card text, which is when this card is destroyed. This means this card can do what we call in Yu-Gi-Oh! Miss the timing. Certain cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, particularly older ones, say when this card, whereas newer cards mostly say if this card. A card that says if this card is not optional, you must trigger its effect. If it has to trigger, you must trigger its effect, and so it will come at the end of a chain, or whenever it was, whenever it can next be activated, it will activate. Whereas if a card says when this card is destroyed, like Gear Town, it means it can miss a timing. What does this mean as TLDR? Never ever destroy this card in response to another card's effect. And you could do that with one of your removal cards, Double Cyclone, which is a quick play spell, but never ever do that if you want to get your summon with this, because it will miss the timing. Make sure that you destroy this card as the first card in the chain, and then it will resolve as the last thing that happened, and you will get your monster. Ancient Gear Howitzer is one of your fusion extenders, and how this card basically works is you use 2 Ancient Gear monsters, summon it to the field, burn your opponent for 1000, and then you use it for something else. It's not your main win condition, but it is a way just to get Ancient Gear cards from your hand to the graveyard, and then you get another card in the field, so extend yourself and win the game. Ancient Gear Ballista is your main extender, and why you are focusing on summoning 2 Earth Machine monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can add any Ancient Gear monster or Gear Town from your deck to your hand, so you get the one which you don't already have access to. If you have multiple cards you have access to, get multiple Gear Towns, and then you can just go off from there. You can target one spell or trap card you control, and one face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy that card you control, and if you do, change that opponent's monster's attack and defense to 0 until the end of the turn. This card helps you set up your OTKs, but it's also a massive downside to this card, which I really actually don't like, and that is if your opponent does not have a card you can target, you cannot use this effect, so you then can't destroy your Gear Town, and you have to do it by other means. So I really don't like that about this card, but you know, it's not going to be very, very often when you are choosing to go second that your opponent doesn't have a face-up monster on the field, so I wouldn't worry too much. Predaplant Vertic Anaconda is your main way to do Overload Fusion. You summon it with 2 effect monsters, and then copy Overload Fusion's effect, and then banish cards from your graveyard to win the game. It is just one of your hyper extenders, and a very, very good card to play. Moving on, we'll talk about now removal cards. Now, you really don't care about removing your opponent's monsters. In fact, your opponent having multiple monsters actually helps you, and your big monsters are going to be bigger than their monsters anyway, so do not worry about that too much. So I haven't really put any main deck monster removal, just spell and trap removal. Reactor Dragon, if this card attacks at the end of the damage step, it can destroy a spell and trap card in the field. When Double Cyclone is like your generic MST card, but it can target one card you control and one spell and trap card your opponent controls and destroy both of them. So another alternative way to trigger your Gear Town if you cannot, say, use Gear Ballista's effect. We also have Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn because they're generic good removal, and Bloodluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. If you need to get rid of a card by banishing it because you don't want to destroy it, or it can't be destroyed and you can't be targeted, you can then, as optional, go for BLS. You have lots of levels set at 7 or higher monsters, so it will get its full effect, and as long as you destroy a card on the field by battle with this card, you'll get to banish it, so it's just there as an alternative option. You don't really want to summon BLS, but if you have to, then there you go. This card doesn't really play defense. This deck doesn't really play defense, I should say. You're not trying to play defense. You don't want to go first. You want to win in one turn. But I thought it would be fun to add in this card here, and that is Construction, Train Signal Red. How this card works is if your opponent attacks, you summon this card to the field, and then that forces the attack to this card, and it cannot be destroyed by that battle. So you summon this in defense, and then hopefully it survives to the next turn, and you have a free Earth Machine monster on the field. Alternatively, we also have Urgent Schedule. Again, you don't want to use this as defense, but if you have to, fine, whatever. You summon your 2 monsters, make a wall, and hopefully they survive. Yeah. Your best form of defense, and one of the cards I love playing, is Ancient Gear Fortress. This card is insane. During the turn they were normal or special summoned, your opponent cannot target Ancient Gear monsters with card effects, and they cannot be destroyed by card effects. Now, Ancient Gear monsters, your bigger ones particularly, if you know anything about them, they already have protection. They already say things like, if this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate spells or trap cards, or unaffected by card effects. This just emphasizes how invincible your monsters will be. And if it wasn't even enough, this card comes with an added effect that I think is so insane. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of Ancient Gear cards and effects. That basically just turns all your cards into Dark Ruler No More and Super Polarization, which is stupid. That's really broken. I think that's really cool, and that's pretty much one of the reasons why I like playing this deck, is because it has that kind of immunity. If you don't understand what that means, what it basically means is you cannot have your cards negated if they have Ancient Gear in their name. So if you summon Wyvern, you can't get ashed. If you play Ancient Gear Fusion, it can't get negated by Solemn Judgment. If you play, I don't know, Ancient Gear Catapult, it can't get hit by Imperial Order unless it's already face up on the field. Your opponent cannot chain in response to your cards. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. The only other card I've ever known to do this generically is Sky Striker Multi-Roll. And if you've ever watched my video of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh!, you will know that Sky Striker was one of the best decks for 2 years running, because that deck was just busted. So yeah, Ancient Gear Fortress, really cool card. Speaking of cool cards, we play a lot of bombs in this deck, and you need to, because you are playing a deck which wants to win in one turn. So, you have different types of bombs in this deck, and the first thing I want to point out is do not ignore your cards. You do have your big flashy extra deck monsters, but do not ignore the fact that in your main deck, you have big beaters like Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon, the Bullet Train card, Ancient Gear Golem is in this deck. Do not ignore that, because sometimes you're going to need another monster on the field in order just to pump a little bit more extra damage or do a bit more damage to your opponent, because your monsters in your extra deck won't be able to do it on their own. So, yeah, these cards are strong. Ancient Gear Reactor Dragon, for example, does piercing damage, which is nice. 3000 attack, piercing damage. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell, traps, or monster effects. Yeah, really powerful card. Do not ignore it, and yeah, just keep that in mind. Now, your main win conditions are for your fusion spells, Ancient Gear Fusion, and Ancient Gear and Overload Fusion. Ancient Gear Fusion is a really fun card that says you fusion summon 1 Ancient Gear Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand and field as material. Now, what I like about your fusion monster cards is they're fairly generic. Megaton Golem takes 3 Ancient Gear monsters, Howitzer is 2 Ancient Gear monsters, Chaos Ancient Giant is 4 Ancient Gear monsters, and then you've got Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, which is Ancient Gear Golem plus 2 Ancient Gear monsters. So they're fairly generic. You don't have to worry about what cards you have in your hand in order to summon this. But what's also nice with Ancient Gear Fusion is it has an added effect, and that is, if you have Ancient Gear Golem on the field, you can then use cards from your deck to fusion summon with, which is also really cool. That saves you a lot of time, it saves you a lot of energy, because you just send them to the graveyard and get them where you want to be if you already have Ancient Gear Golem on the field, as long as you use them as part of the material. And yeah, that's awesome. Just really cool card. The only way you can summon Ancient Gear Golem to the field is via Catapult. It isn't what you main want to do, but if you already have your fusion card in your hand, then that's an option for you. The main card you want to summon with this is Ancient Gear Wyvern, but that's just another line of play, and being able to be flexible and have another line of play is always a good thing, never a detractor in my opinion. Overload Fusion is your second win condition. After you've done your first fusion, you want to do your second fusion, and you summon 1 Dark Machine fusion monster from your extra deck, by banishing the materials from your graveyard. This summons out Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, so you need to get 4 Ancient Gear monsters in your graveyard in order to use your Overload Fusion, but that's really not that hard. You're going to be using materials to summon out your Ballista. Then Ballista is a material. He can then summon out cards through Gear Town, so getting 4 cards to the graveyard isn't too hard. But yeah, that's the card you summon with Overload Fusion. Excuse me. Now, while we're here, let's talk about what these cards do and why they are bombs. So we'll start off with Ancient Gear Megaton Golem. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate its spells and trap cards until the end of the damage step. If this card was fusion summoned using 2 or more Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound, it can attack up to that many times of those monsters that you used. If this card leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, you get to summon your Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem from your Esh deck for free. Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem set is 4,400 attack and says if this card attacks a defense position monster, do piercing damage. If this card attacks, your opponent can activate spells and trap cards to the end of the damage step. And then if this card is destroyed, you get to summon an Ancient Gear Golem from your graveyard. So it's a nice little kind of float loop, almost like an insurance policy between these cards. If one gets sent to the graveyard, you get the other one, and then if that gets destroyed, you get the other one. So kind of nice that these cards do what they do here. Your final boss monster is Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. This is easily the main card you want to go for. Must be fusion summon, blah blah blah. Unaffected by spells and trap effects. Your opponent can activate monster effects in the battle phase. This card can attack all monsters your opponent controls. You can do piercing damage with this. So if your opponent has multiple monsters, you get to do more damage and just go for game. Really, really cool card, really powerful effect. Just be aware, if your opponent only has 1 monster on the field or no monsters, this card will only attack once. So you're going to need something else to help you out to win in one turn. Now, something that I put into this deck that I thought was really, really cool comes down to the effect of Infinitrack Anchor Drill. Anchor Drill has a really cool effect where it says you can target one other machine monster you control. The levels of both this card and the other monster become the combined original levels of those 2 monsters. So mainly with this, you want to combine it with either Wyvern or Brutal Dozer. If you use Wyvern with this, they both become level 8. If you use Brutal Dozer, they both become level 9. And so with that, you can then go into an XE summon to summon out a different type of bomb. It does change your line of play quite drastically, but it does allow you to play defensively. And this is what your option can be if you're going first, because what you can summon can actually be really, really nice. Feel free to change these, by the way. You don't have to stick with these XE monsters, but I think these are good suggestions to go for. So first I'll start with Infinitrack Brutal Dozer. If you make your monster level 9, you can go for True King of All Calamities. This card basically says, during either player's turn, you can change the attribute of all monsters your opponent controls, and then says all monsters of that attribute cannot use their effects. It's a really, really powerful card. If your opponent is playing a monster-based deck, it basically just stops them from playing for a turn. And you can do this as long as you can detach materials. So if you have 2 materials, you get to do this twice. It's quick effect. You can do this in either your turn, protect your board. You can do it in their turn, stop them from playing. Really, really powerful card. Alternatively, speaking of powerful cards, we can go for number 97, Draglubion. Now, be careful with Draglubion. Unlike True King of Calamities, if you use this effect, you can only attack and only special summon. You cannot special summon any more monsters after this, and you can only attack with the monster you summon with this. So be aware of that. You've got to make most of the card that you use with this. But the cards that I chose, you can choose other cards, but the cards I chose are number 92, Heart Earth Dragon, and number C107, Neo Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon. Number 92, so how this card works, I haven't even said that. Your opponent cannot target this card with card effects, so immunity. You can detach 1 material from this card, take 2 dragon number monsters with different names from your extra deck, and summon one of them and attach the other as material. So, you can choose number 92 and number C107 and pick which one do I want to summon, which one do I want to use as XE's material. If you want to add more, feel free to mess around with this engine if you want to. Half Earth Dragon I use defensively, whereas number C107 is more used offensively. C107 Tachyon Dragon is basically like an offensive version of True King of all Calamities, where this card says you can detach a material and negate the effects of all other face-up cards on the field, that means yours as well, and then your opponent can activate cards or effects on the field. So if they have a lot of spells and traps, you say no spells and traps for you, you're not going to negate my stuff, and then you can attack with this card. So yeah, really powerful effect. Half Earth Dragon says cannot be destroyed by battle, has 0 attack and defense, and any damage that you would take from this card your opponent takes instead. You can during your opponent's end phase, you can detach one material from this card and banish all cards that they summoned by normal summoning, special summoning, or any cards that they set to the field this turn. This is kind of like a setup play for a follow-up play, where you summon this card and it's like a ticking time bomb. If they don't get rid of this card, it's going to banish a bunch of cards on their field. So yeah, it's a really big threat. Now of course, your opponent is going to try and get rid of this card. However, if they choose to destroy number 92, it has another effect where it says if this card is destroyed while it has an Xyz material, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. And then, if this card was summoned this way, it gains 1000 attack for every card currently banished. It's a kind of a cool effect. It isn't necessarily the best card you want to go for. You might want to go for something else like Hope Harbinger instead. Might be a better choice, but I thought this could be a fun option, so I wanted to just share it with you. So you have a lot of different mobs with this deck. You have a lot of lines of plays of ways you can go for the game. So let's wrap up this video here and let's go for our last 2 sections. Engine requirements. Ancient Gear Golem. We played 1 copy of it. I'm afraid I am not playing any Ultimate Pounds, and I only played 1 copy of this because really these cards are just bricks. They're not that good. They're really quite bad because they can't be special summoned, so they actually are really quite bad. With my build, it means that I will never ever get the full effect of Megaton Golem, because you will never have 2 or more Ancient Gear Golems. However, if you really care that much, feel free to add more. But I don't think it's worth it, because you're always really kind of going for Chaos Ancient Gear Triumph. And yeah, if you have to summon Ancient Gear Megaton Golem anyway, you're probably going to want to summon another monster to help it out as well. So yeah, I'm not a fan of playing multiple copies of this, but I am keeping 1 because you need it for Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem's summoning requirements, so you got 1 copy at least. So here's the full build. I'm going to quickly run through it, and yeah, here we go. So 3 copies of Turbo Booster, 3 Construction Train Signal Red, 1 Ancient Gear Box, 1 Wyvern, 3 Anchor Drill, 3 Brutal Dozer, 1 Gear Golem, 2 Reactor Dragon, 1 Derek Crane, 1 Bullet Train. The spells: 3 Catapult, 1 Fortress, 1 Fusion, 3 Double Cyclone, 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 3 Gear Town, 1 Instant Fusion, 1 Overload Fusion, 1 Desires, 1 Terraforming, and 3 Urgent Schedule. For extra deck, 1000 Life Restrict, that is a monster removal I forgot to mention. Cybersaurus, Howitzer, Megaton, Chaos Ancient Gear, Ultimate Ancient Gear, Draglubion, Heart Earth Dragon, Tachyon Dragon, Calamities, Ballista, Phoenix, Predaplant Vente Anaconda, BLS, Nightmare Unicorn. And that is Ancient Gears. I didn't think I was going to enjoy this deck. I actually really enjoy this deck, and yeah, so thank you for your suggestion, Taylor, and yeah, thank you guys for tuning into this video. As always, if you have a deck request for yourself, feel free to submit it to myself and I will try and get around to it when I can. But otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Please do subscribe, like, and comment on this video. I love comments, and I realized, I looked at my data recently, only 75% of the people that watch my stuff are actually subscribed, so please hit that subscribe button. This stuff does take a lot of work to do, and a lot of research and a lot of testing, so yeah, please do. Otherwise, thank you guys as always for watching. I will see you soon. Take care.